But the foundation was founded about 6 years ago, and we're a separate organization. We're separate from the school district. As you'll see, there's a huge collaboration and partnership, and it's really the only reason we exist is to work with our students here in the school district. But we're a 501c3 and a nonprofit charitable organization as registered in the Commonwealth. So there's many opportunities that we have to support the foundation. A large part of our contribution to revenue is through something called EITC tax credit, which is large corporations. Pennsylvania is kind of a unique state in the fact that they allow organizations, corporations to qualify for educational improvement tax credits, which takes a percentage of their state tax liability. They may give that to a EITC approved organization. Your foundation is one. That's huge. No small undertaking to become an EITC organization. But we also get contributions from direct individuals and companies as tax deductions. And we also qualify for grants that otherwise may not be available to our students. The foundation had been talked about forming many times, many years ago. So in a couple, 6 years, I'll explain what we've done. It approves grants for innovative programs and tools for our youth in our district. We have funded everything from life skills and special education programs to BEST, Boyertown Employability, skills training program, to the very high tech, robotics, STEM, which is your science, technology, engineering, and math, and at every level of the district. We established a former summer school program, which we now call TIPS, for Teachers in the Park, and we partnered with the Valley Community Park this past year, the past few years, with Boyertown Park. And this is really taking some of our Title I students and breaking that large regression we have over the summer and offering innovative, fun, well-attended summer programming known as TIPS. We've also purchased things like 3D copiers, laser printers, computerized table saws, autistic sensory pass, Osmos, Google Expeditions. If you're not a friend of ours on Facebook, go to Facebook and like Boyertown Foundation for Boyertown Education. You just become up to date with some of the great things that we're able to bring to the district. Also, flexible seating, standing desks, exercise bikes, and reading, all those things not otherwise provided by our budget. We become a great partnership with the district. We're also very part of our collaboration and partnerships that I just mentioned. A few of those would be, we partner with Studio B here in town to bring artists from Europe, Asia, and Pacific Rim to students at both the middle and senior high school. We partner with, again, the parks through our Teachers in the Parks program, the Boyertown Music League to bring PA Philip Larnica to the middle school and fifth grades across the district. We partner with the multi-service to provide gifts to Meals on Wheels with recipients to our art students. So very quickly, Allison only gave me about 3 minutes I've taken for her. By the end of this past year, by calendar year 2018, your Foundation for Boyertown Education has raised over $1.5 million. And to date, we've exceeded $623,476. That's huge. Some of these grants are $200 or $300. Sometimes it's just a little tool or technique or something that a teacher comes to us and applies for a simple 2-page grant that's going to make the learning experience so much better for our students. So we're very proud of your Foundation for Boyertown Education. I want to say mine and the stewards, all of ours. The direct benefit of what we're able to do with this foundation is directly benefit the students of our district. I'd like to recognize our volunteer board, which is Rod Martin, Brian Snyder, Sherry Waldman, Tracy Yerby, Frank Morgan, Sue Hewitt, Nicole Manley. Also, your host tonight, our Executive Director, Tessa Melcher, and our Communications Specialist, which is also a partnership with the district, Allison Moyer. We also have an event committee comprising of community partners and leaders throughout the community, and our faculty advisory team comprised of teachers and faculty right here in the district that serve in that advisory capacity. So on behalf of the Foundation for Boyertown Education, thank you for being here. Hopefully I shared some new and exciting things about what the Foundation is doing for our students and most importantly for our district. Thank you, Tessa. Back to you.
We serve to improve communications, encourage participation, foster understanding, and support the One Boyertown District mission. The Parent Advisory Council was shown the same presentation a few weeks ago at one of our meetings and found it to be very informative while providing much needed clarification as to why the district is in the situation we are in financially. Because of some good discussion that occurred at that meeting, it was decided that it would be beneficial to show the same presentation in a town hall setting. We hope all of you will find it equally informative, and hopefully any questions you may have will be answered this evening. Again, thank you all for attending.
Thank you. And now please welcome Dr. Bedden, Superintendent of Schools for our district.
Good evening. Oh, wow. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the foundation and the PAC, Parent Advisory Council, for hosting this event. I think the impetus of it was very much and clearly spelled out by the PAC representative, the secretary, why we're here. Simply put, you have the foundation, which works alongside the district to try to acquire and produce additional resources that the district may not be able to provide for its students and staff. So there is a vested interest in the foundation understanding the current fiscal state of the school district. And the parent's role, as stated, is to work alongside to be a think tank and problem-solving group that help us address the district's challenges that we may be facing, and felt that it would be very beneficial, as many of them walked away with much more clarity with regards to what is currently happening within our school district. We didn't get here overnight, but we're slowly trying to work our way out of the current situation. Philosophically coming in, when I first looked at the budget situation, I was very clear to the board that you can't tax your way out of this, and you can't cut your way out of this also. If you try to cut your way out of it, you will absolutely devastate the quality of the educational program that Boyertown has come to offer to its students and its community. For the homeowner, it is very clear. If you do not have a good school system, your property values will plummet. If you do not have a quality school system, the research shows crime rate tends to escalate. If you do not have a good school system, healthcare issues escalate also. All those are research-based information that has been studied by multiple universities that say that schools are a part of economic development, the health and well-being of a community. I want to thank you for taking the time to come out. One of our challenges often is that we try to share information, we push information out, and for some reason, it does not seem to be reaching and resonating with the facts that we are trying to share. I hope that you will take this information, share the information openly and honestly. Our books are audited, the numbers are audited. In fact, we're going through an audit process right now. We just had bond rating review. That information will be released shortly. And all of that information is available to anyone who wants to see it because those are public documents. What you will see tonight is, I hope, is a call to action to make sure we do what we need to do to make sure we have a stable organization. Simply stated, we have a structurally imbalanced budget. And that has existed for multiple years. And we need to get our ship in order. If you had a savings account and you were constantly drawing on your savings account to meet your daily expenses, you would recognize that you actually have more expenses than you have revenue that are coming into your home. And that's our current situation. But at the same time, we make challenging and tough decisions about where to reduce expenditures. Oftentimes, people say, we don't want that cut. We want to keep X, Y, and Z. Well, we can't have it both ways. Again, we can't tax our way out of it, and we can't cut our way out of it. We have to have a combination approach. We have to get our expenditures down to align with our revenues to have a structurally sound budget. At the end of this presentation, we will be addressing questions from the cards. Those questions that we don't get to, we will follow up and make sure the answers are posted on the website. We've allotted 30 minutes. The reason we're doing the cards is to make sure that, unlike in other meetings, where we try to do the mic situation, we often get stuck on one or two people and can't get to the rest of the questions. We hope that this is a better method to get more questions answered in public. And again, those that are not answered within the 30-minute time frame, we will get the answers and post them on the website. Those questions that are answered here will not be added to that list. So that's kind of the format that we're going to have tonight. And I hope that you will listen with an open mind and share your constructive questions or thoughts so that we can all work together in a One Boyertown spirit to try to get us back on sound fiscal footing. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Ron Wales and I am the Curriculum Supervisor for Secondary Education. I'm here to talk to you about vision, what it is we are and what it is we want to be. A vision takes an organization or a school district's ideology, our values, our sense of purpose, and turns it into an image of the future. It answers the question, what we are trying to become. If you look at large organizations or any type of organization that's functioning properly, they would have an idea of what it is they are reaching for. Something that is large, something that is aspirational, something that speaks to how they perceive themselves and their own growth and where they want to reach. For example, if you look at a company like Amazon, their vision is huge. They want to be Earth's most customer-centric company where customers can find and discover anything they might want to buy online. Now that is a large vision. And as an educational institution, we should be just as far-reaching and just as aspirational. Vision is about the future. It's not about what we are, it's about what we want to be, where we see ourselves going. It's a mental image that speaks to the rest of the world and to ourselves about what it is we're striving for. Currently, we have a Boyertown dashboard, which is a statement about who we are, what our values are, and how we want to measure our growth towards what we want to be. If you look at the Boyertown dashboard, what you see on it is a mission statement, you see priority areas, you see success metrics or ways to measure how we're achieving those priorities, and you see our core values. Over the last few months, the administration and the board have been looking carefully at what our dashboard actually says and how we are achieving what we say we are meant to be and meant to grow towards. We ran into a problem right away. We realized we don't have a vision statement. We didn't have a clearly articulated statement that says what we are trying to reach for, who we inevitably are trying to be as we strive towards future growth. So when you look at our dashboard, we realize we don't have a vision statement. We do have a mission statement. That mission statement was to enable all students to succeed in a changing world. However, even our mission statement, when we look closely at it, it didn't correspond to the types of mission statements you see in other districts. Mission statements, when you look carefully at them and compare them to what other robust mission statements say, are supposed to have 4 criteria by which to judge them. One of those criteria is the explanation of purpose. It explains the need that the district fulfills and also for whom that need is being fulfilled. It also says how that need is going to be fulfilled. Now, when we look carefully at our mission statement, some of those criteria were missing. So we had to ask ourselves, if we don't have a vision statement and we don't have the criteria of a mission statement, how are we supposed to guide ourselves in the challenging times that we are currently in and that may lie ahead? What we decided is that we wanted to have both. We wanted to have a clearly articulated vision statement and a clearly articulated mission statement. That, according to what those particular statements are supposed to do, fulfills the criteria. They are all necessary. When we look at the dashboard as a statement of purpose for why we are here and what we're trying to achieve, we need our values to be clear. We need a vision and mission statement. We need goals. And beyond that, we need strategies and ways to measure how we're achieving our goals. Moving forward, the Boyertown Area School District has proposed and accepted a clearly articulated vision statement, mission statement, goals, and we are in the process of articulating strategies and metrics of success to show how we're reaching those goals. Why is this necessary now? Some people would say that the vision, the mission, and the goals are kind of, these esoteric statements, these statements that really are kind of theoretical but have no practical application. But I would argue that the vision and mission help guide us, particularly in times of trouble. They help us perceive who we want to be so that when decisions have to be made, it gives us a clear way of evaluating the effectiveness of the actual decision we've made, and it helps us hold to our integrity of who we want to be. So, some vision statement recommendations that we came up with was to take the existing mission statement language that we all appreciated and thought was very well thought out, and put that language towards a vision statement. This is going to honor the past work that has been done and not take and throw the proverbial baby out with the bathwater. We also wanted to provide to that statement a little bit more ambition and character to show who we are as Boyertown in a very unique and individual way. And we also wanted it to focus on the community, bringing us together that's directly aligned with the One Boyertown movement. So what we came up with, that our vision is to cultivate an exceptional, innovative learning community that enables all students to succeed in a changing world. We kept the old language of enables all students to succeed in a changing world. We simply added the aspirations of being exceptional, the characteristic of being innovative, and the language to show that we are all one learning community. Our mission statement that we revised, we wanted to revise it with the 4 criteria in mind. Who are these needs being fulfilled for? What is the purpose of our organization? What need are we fulfilling, and how those needs will be met? So by those 4 criteria, we wanted to create and to judge our mission statement. And this is what we came up with. For all students to be future ready by meeting or exceeding established goals, the Boyertown Area School District will implement coordinated, articulated curricula and provide personalized, planned instruction aligned with Pennsylvania academic standards. That new mission statement answers those 4 criteria and speaks to who we want to be and how we're going to achieve our vision. As we move forward with a new vision and a new mission statement, we started to look at our priorities as well. When we took a look at the dashboard and we saw the priority areas and the metrics of success, we realized there were a couple issues. One, the priorities are topics, not necessarily goals. If you look at the language of the priorities that you should see on the screen, they're not saying what we are going to do or what we want to achieve. They're simply topics which we will address. Also, we came across an issue of how these priorities are aligned to the metrics of success. If you look back at the dashboard, you'll notice that the priority areas and the metrics of success are not actually aligned. And so how do we judge if we're meeting these priorities? And the last challenge, how do we formally monitor and share our progress towards meeting those priority topics and what should be goals? Without those metrics of success aligned to those priority areas and a formalized mechanism, we don't actually know if we're growing towards any goal or achieving our vision. So we wanted to address that as well. What we decided to do was to make 2 documents. One would be our long-standing guiding dashboard that would have our values, our vision, our mission, and our goals. The other document would be more frequently monitored, updated, and would be an organic living document that would look at those metrics of success and speak to what level we were at in achieving the goals. So when you look at the priorities that we had, such as responsible and effective use of resources, we decided to recraft them a little bit so that they actually sounded like goals. So a new goal statement for that particular priority would be to ensure responsible and data-informed use of resources. Another example is where we had the priority effective communication and collaboration among stakeholders. We now say we are here to foster open communication, active involvement, and purposeful collaboration among all members of the Boyertown Area School District learning community, which is language, by the way, we wanted within our vision. The values we didn't touch. The values we kept the same. And we kept them the same because those are the values of Boyertown. And they are long-standing and not nearly as changing as the mission or even the vision of a school district. So what we had before becomes a simplified version of what we have now. This is the new dashboard for the Boyertown Area School District. Simplified, yet some powerful additions. It has the One Boyertown logo on the bottom. It has the values of the Boyertown community elevated to the top. It has the new vision, the new mission, and the restatement of goals. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. I hope you can appreciate the time that was put into this and the many collaborators that gave us feedback along the way. And I hope we can all appreciate the new vision, the new mission, and these new articulated goals. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. I hope everybody can hear me all right. I will tell you that some of these slides have some small numbers on them, so if you are interested in seeing those numbers, I encourage you to come on forward, or you can do it when it's time, but there are some small numbers up there. What's that?
So it's also on the website.
It is on the website, so if you want to go back and check, yes, because that is where this presentation is being taken from. So what we're going to be looking at tonight is a presentation that I gave to the Finance Committee on September 10th, and it's called the Fiscal Status and Sustainability, which is a mouthful. So what we are going to be looking at tonight is the 18-19 fiscal results, and as Dr. Bedden mentioned, those are audited, and the auditors came into our office last Monday, so that's happening right now. We're going to look at some of the challenges that we've been experiencing over the last few years and continue to experience, and also some future needs that we would like to address. And at the very end, there will be one scenario of a projection for multiple years about where we could end up. There we go. All right, so the very first thing that we're going to be looking at is those 18-19 results.
It's just a small PDF.
Sorry about that, everybody. Okay. All right, so since that presentation was a Finance Committee presentation, we brought up the results that had been shown at the previous Finance Committee presentation in August. And you can see there that at that point, we had an excess of approximately $804,000. The revenue was slightly, or about $117.5 million, while expenditures at that time were about $116.8 million, yielding that excess. It's okay. Is it? Maybe you should have. Maybe you should have answered. So isn't this just the overview? Okay, great. All right. All right, so the very first thing that we're going to look at is where the revenue stood and at the August Finance Committee meeting, and we had some very positive results in our earned income tax. You can see that we were over budget in earned income tax by about $672,000, and when I say over budget in revenue, that is a good thing. So we also experienced some positive results in our real estate and other taxes, and those were about $240,000 over budget. We did have, as was mentioned earlier, a pre-K counts grant that was not in the original budget, and that was approximately $204,000. However, I do want to point out that in addition to the revenue that we received, there were also expenditure accounts that went along with that that also had not been part of the budget. But when you're just looking at revenues, you have to keep that in mind. One thing that had been presented at multiple public meetings, I know, is that during the transition in the preparation of the 18-19 budget, that we did have a state grant that was budgeted twice. That was a PA accountability grant for about $928,000. So that was a challenge that we had, but we were very fortunate, and you can see that even with that double budgeting, as we stood at that August Finance Committee meeting, we were just $390,000 under our budget. And part of that also is that because we had lower salaries and benefits, the revenue that we receive, and I'm going to use this term right now, I'm going to define it for you. You'll see PSERS, we call that PSERS. That's the Public School Employees Retirement System. So that's the pension for all the people who are eligible in the school district. So when you hear me say PSERS, I'm talking about our pension program. Because our wages and benefits were lower, that is directly tied. So we were also under budget in that area. So that was about $560,000. So this is the expenditures that were presented at the August meeting, and when I look at this now, being under budget in expenditures is a good thing generally. And the first thing that jumps out at me of that $1.957 million that we were under budget in expenditures, the vast majority of that was in our salaries and benefits. And we're going to look at those in a little bit more detail on the next slide, but I do want to mention that that's one of those good news, bad news things. It is great news that we had some positive financial results in the 18-19 school year. However, the reason that we had that under amount in our salaries and benefits is primarily because we had a lot of turnover and we had a lot of vacancies. And that's not good for our students, and that's not good for our staff, because some of our employees support our other staff members. One of the things that was done during the 18-19 school years, there were some spending restrictions that were put into place in December of 18, and some repairs and maintenance were deferred, and that particular line item, which is rolled up into that contracted services line, was under by about $171,000. We also renewed a copier lease, which resulted in savings of $45,000, and some capital equipment was deferred. So this is that detail of the salaries and benefits that we talked about before. If you look at the very bottom, you'll see that it's a little bit cut off here, but that 1.3 that I said we were under in both salaries and benefits. And the top portion of this slide shows all the individual types of employees. And if you look at where we were under budget in administration, you'll see $168,000. And that's a big number, it really is. And when you look at how much is budgeted, that is 4.4% of the amount that was budgeted. And we did have quite a bit of turnover in the administrative positions in 18-19. You'll also look at the teachers line, and you'll see another number that looks very big to most of us, almost $180,000. Now that is for our teachers line. That's where we have the largest amount budgeted. So even though that number by itself is a large number, when you look at it as a percentage of what was budgeted there, it's a 0.4% under budget amount. The next line down is also another fairly large number, almost $64,000, and that is for our technicians, which includes both our staff nurses and our information services technicians. These are areas that we don't want to have vacant positions, but staff nurses continues to be a challenge for us. For those who may have been at the last Finance Committee or the last board meeting, you will know that we are working to address some of the challenges that we are having of attracting qualified candidates into the staff nursing positions. The next one that is a bigger number is our facilities folks, and you'll see that that's about $116,000 under budget. Those are the folks who clean our buildings. They take care of our grounds and plow our snow. We did have a lot of vacancies in this area as well. We continue to have some of those, probably partly because the wages that we pay for them are not attractive in today's economy. We are working, we have some people in the pipeline to address those vacancies, but those are the kind of things, and I will say my husband is a facilities person. He's an assistant facilities director in another school district, so those kind of people are very near and dear to my heart, but You know, sometimes we don't think about them, but when your trash isn't emptied in your room, when Dr. Bedden doesn't know whether he's going to be able to open school on a snow day, these are really important vacancies for us to fill. And the next one down is instructional aides, and that's $290,000. And those are the people who are working with our students. So that has a big impact. Those vacancies have a big impact not only on our students, but also on the support that those employees provide to our instructional staff. And that is the largest amount where we were under in that year, and that is not necessarily on the largest budgeted line item. So we're looking at about 8.1% under budget for those types of employees. And then the benefits that go along with that. Retirement or PSERS is a percent of wages. So if wages are under, PSERS is going to be under. The same with FICA. So between all of those line items and the associated benefits, that yields that $1.3 million under budget that we looked at previously. Okay, so when we were at the meeting on September 10th, we had some updates for the board and the public, where we had started with that 804 that we looked at earlier at the August Finance Committee meeting. We had some additional work that has been done. Over the summer, we do a lot of work. We learn things, we know things, information that we didn't have on June 30th that does apply to the prior fiscal year. So there is a lot of work that is done in preparation for the audits and getting our books, recording all of the fiscal transactions for the year. So we start off with that 804 access. And after that meeting, we also billed the Berks County Intermediate Unit for our IDEA grant. That is a special ed grant. So that added $524,000 more. Also, we billed for our access grant for 18-19, and that was an additional $142,000. Now, one of our other challenges is charter schools. So at the August meeting, we knew, but we hadn't recorded it yet, that we were going to have a deduction from our subsidy payment, that's how we pay our charter schools, of $98,000. And then we also receive reconciliations from our charter schools that tell us how much we owe them for the prior school year. So we had to accrue an additional amount that will be taken out of our September, October, and maybe even November subsidy payments. So the amount that we ended up accruing for charter schools at the end of the year was $210,000. And then there were some miscellaneous items, some revenue items, some expenditure items through accounts payable, some other journal entries that we made. That was a net of reducing about $181,000. So at that Finance Committee meeting of September 10th, we were looking at an excess of about $1,079,000. And we continue to do work. As I said, the auditors got here last Monday. I worked really, really hard to finish everything up the weekend before there. And because of federal grants, I ended up accruing additional revenue of about $120,000. So the current excess stands at about $1.2 million for 18-19. So this slide is just giving us a visual about where our 19-20 budget is allocated, and you see that big red about 3/4 of the circle. And that is for our personnel costs, our salaries, our benefits, and for the employees that we have recently outsourced. Because we are a services industry, that is where the largest portion of our expenditures will be. The next largest portion is our purchase services. That's about 13% of our expenditure budget. And if you look in the lower right-hand corner, you will see that the largest portion of that is our transportation at about $6.4 million. That contract has recently been negotiated, so there's not a lot of room for us short-term to make too many changes to save money there. We do also pay the Berks Career and Technical Center for our VOTEC. And there are we have the charter schools that we talked about, and there are other tuitions that we pay in that line item that makes up that 13% of our budget. And the next largest, not miscellaneous portion, is our debt service. That's 5% of our budget. Looks about $6.4 million. Those are basically like a mortgage, and We don't have a whole lot of room to change that. We recently, if you've been to our Finance Committee meetings or our last board meeting, we did have an opportunity, because rates have been going down, to refinance some of our bonds. We may realize some savings. We have said to our financial advisor, if we can save $80,000 or more, then to go forward with that bond refinancing. So that is one little bit of an area for us to save. Okay, so the next area we're going to talk about is, as I had mentioned, some of the challenges that we've been facing over the years and that we continue to challenge. And then we'll look at some of the needs that we would like to address. So the first one is, you'll hear, and I will on the next slide explain what the Act 1 index is. But the Act 1 index is what the district is allowed to tax up to, actually the adjusted Act 1 index, without going out for voter referendum. So we have not always gone up to the Act 1 index, and there's some calculations prepared that showed that if we had gone up consistently to the Act 1 index, we would have had about $9 million either in our bank accounts or that we would have been able to use to address some of our other things, possibly our capital projects, building maintenance, and those sort of things. If we had gone up to the adjusted Act 1 index, that number would have gone up to $34 million. And what's, to me, I am fairly new at this job. I don't know if everybody knows that. This is my third week on the job, but I am not new to Boyertown. I worked here from 2007 to 2016. But as I'm preparing for this job, this was a very eye-opening slide that had been prepared for another meeting in the past. And if we had gone to the Act 1 index, in addition to having the additional $9 million available to us, the millage rate actually would have been lower than where we stand today. So this is a definition from the Pennsylvania State Education Association that tells us what is the Act 1 index. And again, the Act 1 index is what we are allowed to tax up to, increase our taxes by without going out for voter referendum. And it is tied to wages, if you look where it's underlined, justified by wage inflation. So that is where that number comes from. The adjusted Act 1 index is also adjusted by our market value personal income aid ratio, things that I know. And that is how we determine what our adjusted Act 1 index is. So another one of the challenges that we face is increasing special education costs. You can see this is a chart of where we have been since the 2006-2007 fiscal year. And those red lines at the bottom is the funding that we have that is directly tied to special education. So you can see as our costs as special education escalate, our funding has pretty much stayed the same over the years. And I always say this is everybody's favorite topic, PSERS, because of some decisions that were made by the legislature in the early 2000s and the way the market had gone in the meantime. In order to have PSERS funded, the rates have had to increase. So for those of you who can't see, we started in 2010, 2011 with a employer's contribution rate of 5.64%. The budgeted, it's more than budgeted. This is what the amount was set by PSERS was 33.43% in 1819, and in 1920 it is 34.29%. So that's quite an escalation. If you look at the increase from 1112 to 1819, you're talking about a 28.10% increase on that line item. So in addition to that, we do have some other future needs. We have a 5-year capital project plan that was presented on June 4th. And this is not a detailed line of all the items that went into there. But over from there were that 1819 and 387 was just some projects that were left to be done at the end of the fiscal year at that time. Again, that was presented on June 4th, before the end of the fiscal year. And then the needs that we have across multiple years. So we're looking at up to 22, 23 and beyond, $14.5 million. We also have some information technology needs. So you can see that those add up to about $1.8 million. And in addition to that, that's not even included in these numbers, is some costs that we will need to address safety and security concerns. So, some of the other things that we would like to take care of to address the needs of our staff and our students. We've had a compensation study, this has been talked about in numerous public meetings, to address the support staff. As I mentioned, some of our areas, the wages are not competitive, and we are having difficulty filling them because people do not want to come and work for the wages that we're currently offering. So the identified amount that would need to be put toward addressing this concern is about $100,000. One of the initiatives is that we would like to get our counselor to student ratio down to about 300 or 350 students per one counselor. Currently, the secondary grades, we have pretty much close to that, so we're pretty good, but we are needing to add some counselors in the elementary area. Approximately one counselor should address that need. Counselors do work 20 extra days outside of the regular school year that teachers work, so they get paid a little bit larger average salary. So the average salary for a counselor would be about $85,000 for that one FTE, plus associated benefits. Librarians is another area. We have librarians in the middle schools that are currently half-time, and they're teaching English language arts. We would like to get those librarians back into the library full-time, and approximately one, I guess I try not to use these words without defining them. FTE is full-time equivalent, so that's one employee basically. So one employee should address that need, and because they are the teachers, they don't have the extra 20 days that the counselors do, that would be approximately $78,000. And once we address that need of getting the librarians back into the libraries full-time, we may also then have an English language arts need. That would be determined on our enrollment, so we don't know how much that would be at this time. The information technology department also needs some additional staff to meet the growing needs of technology in the district. And also our maintenance and custodial staff. As I said, we've been having some difficulties filling vacancies as it is, but we also have many of our custodians who are nearing retirement age, so we are expecting even more vacancies because of that. And toward the bottom they're a little bit cut off. One of the things that we have been evaluating is whether we want to bring a full-time communications and marketing specialist to help us communicate to our community. So as we were putting this presentation together, one of our board members had a question because of some information that was published in the PSBA bulletin, in the March and April bulletin, and that showed the average ratios for faculties to students and management or administration to students, and they wanted to see how we stood up to that. So you can see those numbers. There were multiple categories. I picked the categories that most closely fit Boyertown, so that was based on the enrollment. So we obviously have more than 4,105 students. Our aid ratio falls in that range that's listed there, and I would consider us a suburban school district. So you can see the faculty to pupils and the management to pupils. That's the statewide average. Those are the numbers that are on the left side of the slide. I always like to compare apples to apples, since what was presented in the bulletin was for 17-18. I have access to some statistics that are statewide. It's called 5 sites, so I took our information out of there, and I calculated what our faculty to students and our management to students are, and our faculty to students ratio looks pretty good, looks in line, looks maybe even a little bit better than the state average, which is good because we want to provide our students good teaching services. But management was a whole lot higher. And even though I mentioned how much turnover and vacancies we had in administration in 18-19, I think we had even more in 17-18, so I thought, well, let's look at it then compared to 18-19 as well. Again, our faculty to students looks like a pretty good ratio, not a whole lot of change from the year before. And the pupils per administration does look a little bit better, but we're still not anywhere close to what the statewide average is. And not that we would do this, but just for kind of information, that if we were to try to get administration ratio to pupils to the statewide average, we would have to add approximately 8 to 13 administrators. So not something we're looking at doing, but just kind of eye-opening. All right, and the very last part, I promise, is a 6-year projection, which includes the current budget year. So what we're going to follow up with here is we're going to look at the assumptions. You could make a projection based on nearly any scenario that you wanted. So we picked one scenario, and that's just the one that we're going to be taking a look at. Your projection is only as good as the assumptions you make. We're going to look at the projections themselves, and then we're going to look at the impact that if we were to fall into that scenario, what our fund balance would look like. So that's going to be really hard to see, I know. So I'm going to read a few of the key items. The adjusted Act 1 index, we're going to use that for calculating on the 2021 base Act 1 index. And that information was released in September, so we do know what it is going to be for the 2021 school year. There is also something called the IFO, the Independent Fiscal Office, and they do some projections on Act 1 index as well. So we relied on their projections for the base Act 1 index. As I had mentioned earlier, our market value personal income aid ratio will be applied to the base Act 1 index that would give us the adjusted Act 1 index. So for the real estate taxes, we made the assumption that we would raise taxes to the adjusted Act 1 index. And also what impacts our revenues for real estate taxes is the assessments that we have. So we looked at trends and we assumed a 0.95% increase for assessments during that whole time period. We looked at trends for earned income tax. Currently we're looking at about a 1.78 annual percent increase for our earned income tax. Hopefully the economy will continue to go well as it has been in the last few years, and that won't change, but that's the assumption that we used for that line. Our support staff is given the base Act 1 index for their increases. So that is the assumption that we used for all of our employees, for all types. And again, we use that base Act 1 index as projected by the Independent Fiscal Office. And we use the same staffing levels that we currently have. We didn't add anybody for those positions that we talked about earlier, addressing some of those needs. So it's the staff that we have on hand right now. This year's healthcare budget was increased by 4%, but historically we've used 8% to project what we're going to have for healthcare increases. So that's what we used, other than for the current year that we're in, for the out years on this projection. Social Security is set by the federal government, hasn't changed. And for PEASers, they do publish some projections for out years. So I used the PEASers projections that were published in November of 2018. Every projection should probably be revisited every few months as you get to know more and more information. And I'd say that's probably going to be time fairly soon once PEASers publishes the new rate for the 2021 year and there are any projections that they might have changed. So it'll probably be time very soon to adjust these projections. In the purchase services, I had mentioned that some of our employees have been outsourced. So we assumed that they're going to have about a 2.4% increase on their wages from year to year. But the remaining things in that line item have been going at a 7.2% increase annually. So that was the increase that we're using for other than our outsourced employees. And the other remaining lines, I'm not going to read them all to you. Those are, again, based on trends. And we did use our debt service schedule as is in place right now. As I said, we have had the opportunity to refinance our debt, a portion of our debt. We don't know where that will be yet. So and that's going to be another opportunity for us to adjust our projections. The next slide will be really hard to see. But we have selected revenues at the top, some selected expenditures, and at the bottom is a summary of where we project all these individual things with those assumptions that I just went through, where revenues will go and where expenditures will go, and then it's going to show us our deficit in each year, and and then our cumulative deficit. So one of the things when you're doing these kind of projections, you kind of want to check yourself and make sure that you haven't made a mistake. So if you look in the 1920 line and you look at the state revenue, which is about the second line down, you'll see that the change from the prior year was negative $198,000. And when I first saw that, I said, how is that possible? But then I remembered, as I had mentioned before, that in the prior year we did have that double budgeted line. So that addresses the fact that we had double budgeted something in the prior year. So you probably can't read, most of you probably can't read that, but that annual deficit, the budgeted amount that we have for 1920 is $846, almost $847,000. And then the next year goes up to 1.8 deficit, $2.6 million deficit. 22-23, almost $8 million deficit. 23-24, $4.6 million deficit. And 24-25, $5.5 million deficit. Those are some scary numbers. When you look at that very bottom cumulative deficit, we're talking about $19 million over this time period. So where does that put us on our fund balance? You can see up top, on the top, is our total fund balance. And for 1920, and applying all the deficits that we just looked at, by the time we get to 23-24, we're looking at a negative fund balance. And one of the things we look at is our unassigned fund balance as a amount of months of our expenditure. So we basically, for that calculation, where you see at the very bottom line, ending unassigned fund balance, number of months available for, and I'm sorry, when the word got cut off, for expenditures, that shows the number of months of expenditure we will have in the fund balance and remaining at the end of the prior fiscal year. So we don't even have one full month at the end of 1920, and we basically don't have anything by the end of 22-23 for expenditures at the end of the year. Okay, so that's not the happiest news I've ever had to give. We do have some challenges facing us. We need to, as we work towards serving the needs of our students and our community, and we do want to be working towards fiscal sustainability. So that concludes my report.
Things I want to highlight. We saw that when we started this process, it was showing a projected $1.9 million surplus, which today, going into the audit process, is about $1.2 million. Excess of that original $1.9 million, and we did not change these because we wanted to be consistent, even though we have new information of what has been presented consistently at board meetings and committee meetings and advisory council. But of that $1.9 million, 1.3, as Carol pointed out, had to do with vacancies and turnovers, meaning that you have a lapse in paying salaries when you fill the job, or someone may come in who makes less money. That money is one-time money. You can't depend on that to be the same amount of money that's available year after year, because ideally, your goal is to fill those positions. So you can't make that part of your budgetary plan going forward or use that towards what we call recurring expenses. The $1.2 million that we're showing right now until the auditors finish, which could be less, it could be the same, they could affirm it, is actually about 1% of our budget. And all the fiscal management practices will tell you that when you land between 1 and 2% of your expenditures, you're actually doing a good job. When you get less than 1%, you're running fairly close to dangerously overspending, which in many states is not allowed. It is not something we want to practice, and I've never overspent my budget. We typically purposely practice an effort to come in around 1% less than the expenditures. A lot of our challenges that we're facing also with vacancies and turnover associated with our low pay schedule for our support staff. For instance, our lowest job, I believe, is $9.88 or something like that. I want you to think about what that looks like. that someone is making $9.88. I just can't fathom that. I really can't. And so a pay study was commissioned. That is on the website, that report, that presentation, for anyone to see. But we are not market competitive in many of our support staff positions. Debt service has come up. And what you will find is that our debt service is about 5.5%, which is considered moderate by external evaluations done. That's like your mortgage. So there's been a lot been said about being in debt, but I would ask, what's the answer? Should we not have money to address building modernization? Buildings that were used to teach you and I could not sustain the educational standards and expectations that the Pennsylvania Department of Education has for what is needed today to produce the student for the jobs and what the demand is in the workforce or in the future. And additionally, like anyone else, you would have to repair roofs. You have to repair furniture. So part of that is borrowing money and paying it off over time. So that is a percent of the budget as a payment rather than looking at the entire amount of money. I would ask people to ask the question, if you have X number of dollars of debt service, how much are you spending each year out of your budget to pay that, just like you would in your household for your mortgage, and hold us accountable for that? And reality of life is actually having reasonable and appropriate debt, when you think about yourself, has an impact on your credit rating. Unassigned fund balance is sitting at about 6.3%. The state allows 8% of expenditures. I will tell you that not having the allowable fund balance actually negatively impacts your credit rating, which in turn negatively impacts your borrowing power. It means you pay more money because you don't get the most favorable percentages for the loans. In 2018, and you saw that she showed you the impact of PCERS and how much it's grown, but in 2018, just to give you a hard number, we paid $16.5 million just on the pension plan, approximately. And that has hit all districts significantly hard. Our largest cost is salary and benefits, as you saw. And I'll give you an example of trying to do it differently. We value all of our employees, but when we have turnover, one of the questions I often ask our staff is, can we do it differently? So sometimes we make decisions to change how we offer the program when there's a natural vacancy. That allows us to reduce one of the largest line items without negatively impacting someone who's working for us, meaning no layoff or risk. But we restructure how we offer the program and do it in a more cost-effective manner. At the end of the day, I'm always very clear. The answer isn't always just to say to ask for more money. But you see the impact of not following the recommended increase of cost of doing business that the state puts out. But the other side of it is we also try to tighten our belt. That's the balanced approach that we've been talking about. That we believe in hope that will stabilize our budget process, but also even our bond ratings as we continue to work on it. I've shared with the board that this is a multi-year process. We didn't get here overnight, and we won't get out of this overnight. But it also means some tough decisions of doing it differently. Interesting enough, when we did the analysis of what the Act 1 has been for our district, our Act 1 index actually has mirrored the exact increase that Social Security has increased each year, almost exactly. So when there's an increase in Social Security benefits, it's almost been the exact same percentage. So as we said, I just wanted to capture some highlights from that, and we will try to answer some of the questions based on a card format and take about 30 minutes. Those things that are not answered tonight, we will again answer and put on the website. because I want to honor our staff. So I do want to recognize that I don't take lightly when our staff have been working all day with our most precious commodity, our children, come and join us. So everyone who is a staff member for BASD, please stand and be recognized. How many of you all that are still standing, there are actually tax-paying residents, also their employees, keep standing? Almost all of them. Thank you. So I want to say thank you to them for being here, but I also wanted to recognize them and let you see how many of our staff members actually do live in the district also. So not only serve the district, but in some ways work and pay themselves in the process by paying taxes. So we're going to start. Cards?
Pine Forge.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Go ahead. I've been asked to answer the big resonating question that has come up over and over again. So one of the questions that has come up consistently has to do with what happens if, and the comment is if, the board voted to close Pine Forge. What would that mean for the district? What would that result in as an impact? So, if Pine Forge were to close, how would Boyertown Area School District use the approximately $2.6 million annual operating expenditure reduction to benefit students, staff, and the community? As previously shared by the administration, and these things are not new. We just consolidated them. They've been through several presentations and budget meetings. They were part of the right sizing process, and they've been a part of community presentations. The funds will be used via administrative recommendations, meaning these are recommendations that the board will have to approve that will address any one or more of the following district-wide opportunities. First is to address our budgetary deficit and its impact on fund balance, which in turn will positively impact our bond rating, which actually would save us money, which means money that could be reinvested back into the general fund to serve all students and staff. Two, to address future capital projects, which provides much needed improvements for our schools. That would free up money to do that. Three, to offset the financial impact of contract settlement with the Teachers Association, which helps with cost avoidance associated with increasing budgetary expenditures and a deficit. As you know, we have an unresolved teacher's contract. That is another expenditure that will be coming forward on top of the already strapped expenditure. We typically right now are operating at a $120 million revenue, but really we start each year out, since I've seen in the last few years, with about $4 million more in expenditures than what we are actually have available. So we're operating like $124 million worth of expenditures. Coupled with whatever happens with contract negotiations, that would be an additional cost. That means more possibly contributions to PCERS also. So part of our hope is getting our expenditures down to free up money to appropriately compensate and keep our talented teachers. Is that why we're doing this? No, this is one of the possible benefits should the board actually choose to close the school. It will reduce our expenditure line item. To address the approximately $100,000 in pay disparity for support staff throughout the entire school district. We had a study done. We have an idea, a rough idea. We would do a detailed analysis, but we actually have staff who are not being paid at market value based on the study. And our goal and desire is to make sure that we are being competitive and supportive of our support staff also. At the end of the day, we're losing a lot of people towards retirement. The new potential candidates are really turning us down because they want market value. They're turning us down because they want to be competitive. They have families. And we're losing some of our most talented people to districts like Springford who are paying better than we are. To help reduction in vacant positions, Staff that are in the school would be reassigned to other vacant positions, which would reduce some of the vacancies and workload. To bring the number of counselors up to the target ratio of 300 to 350, so we would, again, assign staff to support that initiative and also request that the board redirect funds to get to that number. Right now, for example, we have a school that has one counselor for 700 students. So that is a challenge, that is an equity issue. We have custodians who can't get to the square footage ratio that we recommend they should have to clean their buildings. But between the vacancies and the size of the schools that are happening. We would, and have put this out, want to reinstate our librarians to full-time status. We currently have our middle schools that actually have librarians who are sharing their time and providing instruction in the classroom. We would also then use some of that additional funding to offset any need for additional English language arts teachers by reassigning the librarians to their full-time status in the library. To address information technology and maintenance and custodial staffing needs. Again, we have a large number of vacancies in those areas. They are causing critical shortages and work challenges for our staff because of the low numbers that exist. We have always cafeteria vacancies for food service. We will be able to redirect some of that staff to fill those vacancies. To address our need for full-time communications and marketing specialists, there's a cost avoidance of approximately $1.8 million functional upgrades to $8 million renovation. I will tell you, we just received an updated analysis. It is a construction company's market now. There's more work than there are workers, so it's a company's market. The prices have continued to escalate in what it costs for construction projects. The estimate provided by our new facilities director is that in the next 2 years, if we did a full renovation, that number would jump to about $9.5 million as it continues to escalate because of the market changes. The same thing is happening slightly with just what we call functional upgrades that are probably more likely to be higher and closer to $2 million. And I would tell you that some of that work is not about aesthetics. At the end of the day, right off the bat, you got about $700,000 just for the air conditioned unit. That is the only school that is not air conditioned, for example. It also is an equity issue. That we should not be worried about dismissing those students from school because it is too hot while everyone else gets to stay in and get the full day of instruction that parents and taxpayers have paid for. So we would not recommend it. If we keep the building open, we are absolutely committed to recommending as administration that those at least functional upgrades be done to make the building at least more functional like the rest of our schools. And we call it functional because all of our school needs work. I can tell you right now, we have some major concerns with the electrical system at Boyertown. It's crazy. Yeah. It needs work. And overall, our entire staffing ratios, because we would redirect some of those staff, some of the staff would follow students to try to address and maintain our class size ratios. And in some cases, we may benefit and be able to do better than what we've done in the past with our ratios for our class sizes. So that has been a consistent question that we've been asked to address. So we wanted to go ahead and make sure we answered what are some of the things that would or could happen if that decision is made. Ultimately, it's an administrative recommendation. The board ultimately has a final say in what happens as we move forward with this process. Are we closely monitoring the cost per student at a dynamic, as a dynamic of our district performance? I think that's what it says. Is that what it says? I'm assuming when they say the student,
Dimension.
the monitoring cost per student. Yes, we do monitor the cost per student. I will tell you the last observation that and data that we look, there's a thing called forecast analytics that we use, that they take the data from every district that's turned into PDE. We are a member of that group. They populate the data, and we are still one of the lowest cost per student districts in Berks County. We are also absolutely, when you compare to Montgomery County, since we serve 2 counties with student population, at the bottom of that cost per student. We are one of the more efficient and low cost per student districts in the area when it comes to what we spend per student. I think the last time I looked at it, at one point we were about $4,000 less per student compared to Montgomery County schools, and about $1,500 less per student compared to Berks County. So you could take $1,500, multiply by 7,000, that'll probably give you an idea of a pretty good chunk of change, and we would just be at the median of the county when we looked at it. That was just to get to the average per student expenditure in Berks County. So we're $1,500 the last time I looked at it below. With the projected deficits, what direct impact will that have on the students? Well, one is we risk right now having a challenge with meeting the needs of our teachers. Unhappy teachers mean unhappy students. We are struggling to meet the needs of our teachers as we go forward. We continue to have challenges with regards to meeting the needs of our facilities and the work that has been identified that needs to be done. So we are struggling. One of the things that is coming out quite often is we have not established a defined funding source for our maintenance of our buildings. The board is given credit for having yearly and regular discussions, but we actually need to develop a true funding plan, dedicated funding source to continue to do required maintenance, as opposed to getting backlogged with deferred maintenance. Environment influences attitude. Proper teaching and learning environments are significant to supporting quality instruction. It all has an impact. It also means that it can impact if we are not able to stay competitive with the surrounding school districts. Parents who have choice pick where to live based on school districts. Companies actually make decisions on where to relocate based on school districts. We are right now sitting at a B+ rating by niche. We're at one point an A- district. Niche is a very common relocation tool for companies and families. What will happen if the board does not allow the tax increase to be approved up to the Act 1 amount? I would tell you personally, it will mean potentially significant reductions to balance the budget in programs and probably staffing. Because 75 to 80% of our budget is people. The amount of money, so just last year, for example, I think just going to the adjusted Act 1, I'm doing this from memory, produced about $2 million. Correct, Carol?
I wasn't part of that process.
Yeah. It's about $2 million, Ms. Dennon? You remember? So not doing it right off the bat puts us $2 million in the hole to start with. Those projections that you saw from Mrs. Pitts even included already going to the Act 1, adjusted Act 1. So those numbers would be larger of the projected deficits. That's why I spoke about a combination approach. That's why we put spending restrictions on in December. That's why we try to renegotiate certain contracts. That's why we see certain vacant positions and said, can we do it differently? A combination of cutting and reducing some of our expenditures to go along with revenue that is coming in by going to the Adjusted Act 1. Remember, that is something that comes out from the state that is basically saying, to cover the increased cost, this is what we recommend your budget should increase, which is why it does not require taxpayer approval. They're saying this is a reasonable increase because cost goes up. PCERS goes up. We don't have a say-so. Does the 1.2 million excess include the 11 million of fund balance we used to fund the 18-19 budget? Well, we didn't use the 11 million to fund, and that 11 million is a combination of unassigned and assigned fund balance. We only have about 7 million in unassigned fund balance. The 1.2 will be after the auditors finish their report to either verify that that number is correct. Then we will have to make a recommendation to the board of what to do with that 1.2. So that 1.2 could be used to get our fund balance closer to the 8%. That 1.2 could go into capital projects if to address some of the facility issues. But none of that is accounted for right now. That number is sitting on the books, waiting for auditing to verify if that number is accurate, and then we make a recommendation. 11 million is a combination of unassigned and assigned fund balance. And anything that's assigned can only be spent for those things that it's assigned to. So for example, we have a capital dollars that can only be spent on capital projects. We have technology that can only be used for that, and I think with PCERS.
Well, those are other funds. So
Right.
in the general fund, we have the committed fund balance that we have currently committed to PCERS.
Right. So the unassigned, that means we can use for anything that they talk about, 8% of expenditures. That 1.2 was not accounted for yet. We're waiting for auditing to verify if that's the final number. If we are having trouble hiring and keeping staff, how do we expect to close a school and here have more staff to cover classrooms that are full? When you reduce your expenditures, you actually redirect that money to add to attracting staff. So if you reduce your expenditures, I actually can then reassign staff to other buildings and other assignments. So I won't have as many staffing to make. So for example, if I had 100 staff members and that building had 10, I now have 100 staff members to work in 9 buildings. So I don't know who asked the question, but I hope that makes sense. We do what we call FTE. The current proposal with scenario 2 that was given to the board did not have us furloughing or riffing anyone. It had us reassigning those staff to other vacancies. So for example, we have custodians that work in the school. That custodian would be moved to a vacant spot so we don't have to hire anyone in that spot. That counselor would move into another counseling role. So it actually helps you fill your vacant positions that you have, because the plan did not include furloughing or riffing anyone. We believe we have enough vacancies within the district to reassign staff to help us close those vacancies. What can we do to attract more business to Boyertown? I'm going to say this to you. Having worked in multiple jurisdictions, that is a municipality question that they really have to address. Whoever asked that question, I'm more than happy to give you my professional and personal opinion, having worked in places where we did things to attract businesses. But I would just say generally, some things would have to change, for instance, in Berks, with some of the restrictions they have that make it harder and less attractive for businesses to come in the area. That's just an overall, I can tell you what I've seen from being out and talking to some of the businesses. You have to make it attractive. At the end of the day, you absolutely want more businesses because that actually is a revenue source that actually helps you soften the impact on homeowners. That is the best answer to the question until another funding mechanism is provided in the Commonwealth. For example, one of the reasons Upper Marion has some of the lowest taxes in the Commonwealth is why? They're plush with businesses. It is really probably one of the lowest taxing municipalities in the Commonwealth because of the mall and all the businesses they have. Does the projection include anticipated tax revenue from many new developments being built now and are approved for staff in the near future, to start in the near future?
It's in that 9.92% assessment.
Yes. So the 0.92 assessment does include that, but I'm going to share with the other challenge that we're facing that some of you may have seen. The business growth is not keeping up with the projected homeowner growth on one side of our district. If that growth comes, there's an increased acceleration of costs to serve the number of students that potentially, again, has a strain on the district. There was a reference in an article asking about whether or not there's conversation with businesses to help talk about that. I will tell you, I wasn't really thrilled with the answer that was given in the paper, and I'll leave it at that, because I don't want to get in trouble again of trying to address a misrepresentation in the paper. But our business growth that we're seeing developing is not keeping up with what the projections would be for homes being developed, which would, if the projections show about 5 years out with student growth, that could put a strain on the district. But right now, we're projecting numbers using our own demographers that are accounting for the building. But if you look at every other report across the state, it showed that we've been declining about 1% per year. So in all actuality, PDE and everybody else shows the district losing students. And in truth, our prime was about 7,100 students, I think, at one point. We're down to about 6,800. So there is time before those numbers show up that we're projecting to show up in the district. It won't happen overnight, assuming that it does happen. That was it. We thank you very much. Again, I want to remind you that presentation was done September 10th. It is on the website because I know some of the numbers were small. So if you could not see them, please take time to look at it. I think that was nothing we didn't cover.
The remaining questions will be on the website.
Yeah, and the remaining questions that we have will be placed on the website. I guess they're telling me that's time. So thank you very much. Thank you.